A very good morning. You're watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Gyanvapi. Let's get you the headlines at this hour. A teenage gunman killed 19 young children in a shooting at an elementary school in Texas. In the deadliest U.S. school shooting in years, President Joe Biden says, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? A mob of angry protesters set Andhra Pradesh's Transport Minister's house on fire after district is renamed. Section 144 has been imposed in the town of Amalapuram. Targeted killings by terrorists in the valley. Terrorists gunned down a policeman. His 7-year-old daughter has been injured while trying to save her father. Beg India to reconsider the wheat export ban as soon as possible is what the IMF chief is saying to NDTV at Davos. In Cambridge, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has alleged that there is a systematic attack on institutions that allow India to speak, and the deep state is entering those spaces. Our top story, very tragic news coming in of a teenage gunman who's killed 19 young children in a shooting at an elementary school in Texas on Tuesday. The 18-year-old gunman was believed to have shot his grandmother before heading to the Robb Elementary School at around noon, abandoning his vehicle and entering with a handgun and possibly also a rifle. The governor said the suspect, whom has been named as Salvador Ramos, a local resident, was involved in the shootout, is believed to be responding to the officers. They have happened to kill him as well. The death toll includes 2 teachers and the assailant himself, as well as 19 young children. The deadliest shooting at a U.S. grade school since a gunman killed 20 children and 6 adults at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut almost a decade ago. And it came just about 10 days after a gunman in body armor killed 10 black shoppers and workers at a supermarket in Buffalo. Now, this is what was being called as a racist attack, which happened in Buffalo, while President Joe Biden has reacted to the attack on the little children, saying it's time to turn this pain into action for every parent, for every citizen in the country, asking when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby?
As of now, we're still working on this active investigation. Once we're able to provide information to the families, we will do so. First and foremost, obviously, our priorities is to get information to our families and give them some information. So please bear with us in regards to that. Secondly, once we do get some information that we can release to the public, we will be doing that. So please know once we do get some information, we will share that with you and call another press conference. Let me assure you, the intruder is deceased, and we are not actively looking for another individual or any other suspects in this case. We definitely ask you all to keep the families that are involved in your prayers.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? It's been 3,448 days, 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents of gunfires reported on school grounds. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Santa Fe High School in Texas. Oxford High School in Michigan. The list goes on, and the list grows when it includes mass shootings at places like movie theaters, houses of worship, as we saw just 10 days ago at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. I am sick and tired of it. We have to act. And don't tell me we can't have an impact on this carnage.
President Joe Biden there delivering an emotional call for new restrictions on firearms after a gunman opened fire at a Texas elementary school, killing 19 children. The President of the United States is asking when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby. While the Senator in Connecticut, Chris Murphy, who hails from the state where 26 people were killed way back in 2012, that attack at the Sandy Hook Elementary School, took to the floor of the U.S. Senate on Tuesday to accuse his colleagues of not doing enough to prevent school shootings.
14 kids dead in an elementary school in Texas right now. What are we doing? What are we doing? Just days after a shooter walked into a grocery store to gun down African-American patrons, we have another Sandy Hook on our hands. What are we doing? There have been more mass shootings than days in the year. Our kids are living in fear every single time they set foot in a classroom because they think they're going to be next. What are we doing? Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate?
Moving on, a policeman was shot dead outside his Srinagar home by terrorists on Tuesday. His 7-year-old daughter, who reportedly rushed to save him, was also injured in the attack. The cop has been identified as Saifullah Qadri. Qadri and his daughter were shifted to a nearby hospital where he succumbed to the injuries, but his child, who suffered a bullet injury, has made it through. She is said to be out of danger. To get more details on this, we have my colleague Nazir joining us on the phone line. Nazir, if you can take us through the background of the policeman who was shot and has come to his injuries. Also about his 7-year-old daughter, who apparently rushed to save her father, was also injured in the process. Is she okay? Apparently she's in hospital. She's out of danger. But how bad were her injuries?
Well, she has received a blood injury in her arm, and she is fortunately out of danger. Little kid had to suffer this consequence of this senseless violence while her father was targeted. It is a target attack, clearly. Saifullah Qadri was a very active policeman. If you see, he's in the uniform. He is like a black commando wearing black uniform. He's in a police uniform, working actively against militancy as well as part of the Srinagar police force. And yesterday evening he was outside his home with his daughter when he was targeted. So clearly it was a premeditated attack. They knew his movement there. They knew he was at home, and police say it was attack cowardice. So when a defenseless person was without arms, he was targeted like this. Having said that, this is not the first time that such an incident has happened. This month, only Riaz Ahmed, a policeman, was killed inside his home in Pulwama. He was also without any arms. Rahul Bhat, a government employee, Kashmiri Pandit, was killed. Last month, one policeman, a special police official, and his brother were killed inside their home in Badgaon. So there have been number of incidents. For example, early this month, on 7th of this month, Ghulam Hassan, a police constable, was shot on his motorcycle, and he died after a few days of his serious critical injury. So, series of incidents. There have been more than 100, deaths this year. 77 are militants, 13 are civilians, 16 are police and security force personnel. So, unending cycle of while security force launch relentless operations against militancy. Not only they have killed 77 militants, but police say there are large number of cache of arms and ammunition. Mostly pistols have been recovered, which clearly shows pistols are always used for target attacks. For example, 2 days back in Srinagar, 15 pistols were recovered from Chandpura neighborhood. In Baramulla, a number of pistols, so hundreds of pistols have been recovered. So which clearly shows, The handlers across, they want to keep the pot boiling. They want to push more arms here, particularly these small arms, which also shows a very, worrying trend that the youngsters, youth are willing to join militancy. That remains the big challenge. So killing militancy will not kill militancy. It has to be holistic view, how to take the society along and fight it better.
Right. Thank you so much, Nazir, for bringing us those details. Yet another policeman losing his life to terrorists in the valley, and in the process, his 7-year-old also gets injured. Meanwhile, LG Manoj Sinha visited the residence and met with the family of Rahul Bhat, who was shot dead by terrorists on the 12th of May at his residence. Kashmiri Pandit employees have been protesting over the killing of their colleague, demanding that they be moved out of the valley. And with that, we're sipping a very short break. On the other side, we'll get you Rahul Gandhi, who has attacked the government, raising questions of a systematic attack in Cambridge. Welcome back. The Archaeological Survey of India on Tuesday opposed a plea before a Delhi court seeking restoration of Hindu and Jain deities inside the Qutub Minar complex, saying it's not a place of worship and the existing status of the monument cannot be altered. The ASI has also said the fundamental right of the applicant cannot be availed in violation of the existing status of the land, taking note of the ASI submission that the Qutub Minar is not a place of worship and the existing status of the monument cannot be altered. The additional district judge, Nikhil Chopra, reserved the order or the plea for the 9th of June. Moving on, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has alleged that there is a systematic attack on the institution that allow India to speak, and as the conversation is being stamped out, the deep state is entering those spaces and redefining the way that conversation is happening in the country. This is what he said on Monday in Cambridge during an event entitled India at 75 at the prestigious Cambridge University. Mr. Gandhi spoke on a broad range of subjects from Hindu nationalism, the Gandhi family's role within the Congress party, and also the efforts to mobilize the people of the country, as he fielded questions from a largely Indian student base.
What I see is going on is a systematic attack on the institutions that allow India to speak. Right? Parliament, the election system, the democratic system, the basic structure of democracy is being captured by one organization. And as the conversation is being stamped out, the deep state is entering those spaces and redefining the way that conversation is held. The first level of monopoly is the media monopoly. I think what someone said, 140, 160 media entities owned by one person.
Yes.
Right? So you have a media monopoly, and then you have multiple monopolies, business monopolies, that provide finance to the BJP.
And with that, we're sipping a very short break. On the other side, we'll get you Russian and Chinese jets flying close to Japan's airspace, just as the Quad leaders met in Tokyo yesterday. Welcome back. The news coming in from Saudi Arabia. Following the rapid surge in the number of daily COVID infections over the past few weeks, Saudi Arabia has banned its citizens from travelling to India just weeks before the Hajj pilgrimage. My colleague Nazir brings us the details.
Mushtaq Ahmed is nervous after he heard about the flight ban by Saudi Arabia as he prepares to travel for the Hajj pilgrimage next month. The flight ban decision has come as a surprise for people like Mushtaq Ahmed, who have been waiting for the pilgrimage since the last 3 years. The 65-year-old praised that the Hajj flights are exempt from the ban.
3 साल पहले उनके इंतजार कर रहे कि हज पे जाएंगे इंशाल्लाह अभी तो बना था प्रोग्राम बना था लेकिन अब जो न्यूज़ आ रही थोड़ा कंफ्यूजन हो रहा है परेशानी हो गई सबों को.
Around 10 lakh people are expected to perform Hajj in 2022. This is half the number of pilgrims who performed it before COVID-19. From India, 79,000 people can undertake the Hajj pilgrimage, and it's after a gap of 3 years that the pilgrimage was expected to resume. The Hajj tour operators say that they have not received any intimation as to whether the Hajj pilgrimage will be affected due to outbound flight ban by Saudi Arabia.
Actually, the Hajj is taking place after the gap of 3 years, but we never know the emerging COVID situation across the globe might change and it might cast shadows. But let's keep our fingers crossed and hope and pray that it doesn't take the toll on pilgrimage, because people have been waiting since last 3 years.
In Trivandrum, Hajj tour operators are worried as to whether it will impact the upcoming pilgrimage, but are also hopeful that India and Saudi Arabia governments may find a way out.
Everybody is scared about whether this will affect the Hajj pilgrimage. I personally feel that it may not affect the Hajj pilgrimage from the Hajis from India, because I'm sure that Government of India as well as Government of Saudi Arabia will be taking enough precautions for people to go and have a smooth Hajj pilgrimage.
Weeks before Hajj operations start this year, flight ban by the Saudi Arabia throws a spanner in the works. 79,000 Indians are expected to perform Hajj this year. They only hope that the flight ban doesn't come in the way of pilgrimage. In Srinagar, Nazir Masoodi, NDTV.
Sir Ratan Tata's Institute, or RTI, is probably one of the most popular guru places to indulge in any cravings for Parsi cuisine that finds its influence from Iran. But RTI is so much more than just that. The Sir Ratan Tata Institute has stood in that same place, quietly changing lives for 90 years in Mumbai. It was established as a tribute to Sir Ratan Tata. Here's a report.
This building at the busy Hughes Road is home to RTI, one of the most well-known centers for Parsi cuisine in Mumbai. The aroma of freshly baked cookies and lip-smacking delicacies wafts out of the confectionery and kitchen. From cakes, cutlets, cookies and biscuits to traditional Parsi delicacies, RTI makes top-notch sweets and savouries. Patrail, made from colocasia leaves, is a delicacy that's in high demand, and the chefs are a part of the legacy. Some have spent nearly half a century in these kitchens.
37 साल से हम सब कुछ बनाते हैं. पात्रा फिश, सलीम होती. मारू नाम छे माने पीठा वाला. माने 30 years થઈ ગયા આટે. Actually હું ગામથી આવેલી હતી. 18 years ની હતી તારી.
RTI has also evolved with time and is now listed with food aggregators like Zomato and Swiggy. But for old-timers, a visit to the store is a must. For some it's childhood memories, for some memories of their first date, but across generations, RTI remains a favourite.
The quality of the materials available, we enjoy it, and lots of varieties.
Parsis love food, so you will always find Parsis around here.
I'm not from here, I'm from Bangalore. I met my wife here in Bombay and she introduced me to it. And ever since I met her, and we met 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I've come regularly.
I've been coming since I was a kid. My parents have been coming, and I just feel like over the years they've expanded in what they offer to people. So there's food for everyone, not just Parsis.
I like the ultimate pie. Last time when I came here, there was like a hot dog. I even like that.
We love this place. Environment, ambience is also good.
The RTI today takes pride in being an equal opportunity employer and supports differently abled and senior citizens by finding roles for them within the institute.
In the past, RTI has been more Parsi-centric. We're trying to reach out to the wider audience as well now. Of course, in Bombay, in and around an RTI store, everyone knows it, but far more beyond. So we're now on Swiggy, Zomato.
Across the street stands the RTI Annex that offers the best hand-stitched apparel boutique. Hers for women's apparel and Bambino for children's clothing. On the top floor here is the embroidery unit, where embroiderers work painstakingly on creating saris with sequin work, shadow work, cut work, applique work and Gara embroidery, all RTI's forte.
I joined RTI in 1973. I love machine embroidery.
Each handcrafted Gara masterpiece takes several months to a year to complete. The institute also has a Montessori school and a Montessori Teachers Training Institute. The Sir Ratan Tata Institute, or RTI as it's commonly known, has a legacy of nearly a century, set up in 1929 by Lady Navajbai Tata with an aim to provide employment and opportunity to less privileged women. Today, it's grown way beyond that goal. In Mumbai, with camera person Rajendra Dayalkar, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
And with that, we're taking a very short break. On the other side, we'll get you the very latest from the IPL. That and a whole lot more. Stay with us. All right, moving on now to other news, and a fresh petition has been filed before the Varanasi civil judge seeking a ban on entry of Muslims into the Gyanvapi complex and handing over the complex to Hindus. The petition seeks permission to pray at the Jyotirling that was supposedly found at the Gyanvapi during the video survey. The petition has been filed by the Vishwa Vedic Sansthan. The original case too was filed by members of the same organization. Now remember, this is just a plea and the court will decide on whether to even admit it or not. And this even as the court is dealing with the original plea that was transferred to it by the Supreme Court. But now, amid the Gyanvapi mosque row, hardline Hindu organization Vishwa Hindu Parishad has conducted rituals around the perimeters of the Madani Jummah Masjid at around 8 this morning after a temple-like structure was discovered during the demolition of the masjid. If the priest claims that a temple existed before, the issue is likely to snowball into a huge controversy in Karnataka, as this region is known as for being a BJP bastion. Mangaluru police have clamped Section 144 in and around the sensitive areas of the masjid, which came into effect from 8 p.m. on the 24th and remains active till 8 p.m. on the 26th of May. The third additional civil judge and JMFC court had issued a temporary stay on the demolition of the masjid after a temple-like structure was found. The Deputy Commissioner confirmed the veracity of the claims made by the VHP will be verified before taking reports both from the Endowment Department and the Waqf Board on ownership of the land. So another controversy surrounding a mosque, this time in Karnataka, and attempts to also conduct some sort of ritual and a puja around this area where the masjid is. This after claims that a temple-like structure was found there. Remember, these are all claims taking place that still need to be verified, however, creating tension now in the area. Well, let's go across to Shrija now for more. Shrija, just explain to us what all has happened. Also, there was security announced yesterday, but even so, there has been a ritual conducted there?
Well, firstly, no competent authority has given permission, especially for Vishwa Hindu Parishad, which is a hardline Hindutva organization in Karnataka. Now, they've gone on their own and conducted this particular ritual. Now, the ritual is about where several priests that are being involved to find out, if at all, a temple that existed just underneath this particular Jummah Masjid mosque that we're talking about. So, of course, security measures have been already stepped up. Just yesterday, we understand Section 144 was clamped by the Mangaluru police. This is within the perimeters in and around the mosque that we're talking about. And this is second such mosque that's been reported here, especially that's come under the scanner of Hindu organizations. So as far as the mosque and the claims that have been made by the Hindu organizations are concerned, firstly, the additional sessions court has already stayed the demolition of this particular mosque after the claims had surfaced, which was made by the Hindutva organization. And even despite the controversy surrounding this particular mosque, we see just this morning, just about at around 8 a.m., we see Vishwa Hindu Parishad had already called a few priests to the location, and they had conducted the pujas and rituals right in and around this particular mosque. And we see the police have stepped up the security. What's important to note that even KV Rajendra, who's a deputy commissioner, he did go on to confirm, saying that they will be taking records from the endowments department with regard to the land records and the ownership of that particular land.
All right. Thanks so much, Shrija, for joining us with those details or controversy around another mosque versus temple claim. Well, with that, time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, how there was violence in an Andhra district over renaming of the district, and a minister's house was even set on fire. We'll get you all the details. Welcome back. Now, the latest on monkeypox, and Ministry of Health and Prevention has confirmed that they have detected the first case of monkeypox in the UAE. This has been reported in the media there. The ministry revealed that the first case was detected in a 29-year-old woman who arrived from West Africa, noting that she is receiving the necessary medical care. So a fresh case of monkeypox, this time in the UAE. Well, to talk more about this new disease, and as everyone has a lot of concerns around it, as even the World Health Organization has spoken on it, we're now joined by Dr. Fahim Yunus, Chief of Infectious Diseases, University of Maryland. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us this morning. And the question that everyone is asking regarding monkeypox, first and foremost, what are the symptoms?
This is a very different disease than COVID because it's spread by close contact. And patients usually go through two phases. The first phase is the one of invasion, where patient can experience flu-like symptoms, headache, fever, and then just body aches and sometimes swollen lymph glands. That lasts for the first 5 to 6 days, and then a blistering rash develops that typically gets better between 2 to 4 weeks.
All right, so how deadly is it? Is it life-threatening? What is the mortality rate?
It can be life-threatening, but there are more than one clades or families of this virus. The one that has typically been circulating in Africa in the past has a mortality anywhere from 1 to 10%, but we believe that currently the cases that have spread, none of the patients so far have died. About 35% have been hospitalized. And a previous outbreak in USA about 20 years ago also caused a few dozen cases, but not a single person died. So I believe it's too early to pinpoint the mortality, but clearly with the clade that is currently circulating, it does not seem to be lethal.
All right, Doctor, now this is a new virus and we've been dealing with COVID over the last few years. So are we better prepared to deal with it as compared to COVID?
Absolutely. I think there is no comparison between this virus and COVID, and that has to be emphasized over and over again. COVID is still a hugely great threat, a much larger threat than monkeypox, and for the following reasons. This is not a more novel virus. This virus has been circulating for the past 50 or 60 years. There is already a pre-existing smallpox vaccine that gives at least 85% protection against this virus. There are antivirals like SD246, which was never in production because we eradicated smallpox. So this virus is not airborne like coronavirus. So there are absolutely no comparisons. And when I hear people making a comparison between this and COVID or people feeling scared that this will lead to more lockdowns and again travel restrictions. I just don't see that scenario.
All right, but screenings have begun, like even in India, the screening has begun in Mumbai. So how does one test for this?
Right, so the testing right now is not common and not ubiquitous. You can't just go to your doctor's office and get tested. At present in USA, we are sending all these samples to CDC. God forbid if the disease spread more and we started seeing thousands of cases, of course, I think then testing will become more available as well. But what people need to do right now, I believe, is just educate yourself. I don't think there is any intervention on a human level, on a population level. You just need to truly educate yourself about what this thing is. If you go to a large communal event, hundreds, thousands of people in close contact, and you develop a flu-like illness and then you start developing a blistery rash, then yes, you need to immediately go see your doctor. But I don't want people to start using health foods. I don't want them to start taking any medications, whether they're allopathic, homeopathic, or anything. I don't want people to start looking for smallpox vaccination. None of those interventions are necessary right now.
All right, so that's very helpful to know. So, and how can one protect themselves against this to prevent, catching monkeypox? We have masks and vaccines which work for COVID. What works for this?
Monkeypox is not going to, a mask will not be as critical as close contact. So making sure that once somebody has this infection, isolation, quarantining for a couple of weeks will work absolutely beautifully because this is not an airborne virus, and just maintaining that physical distance for a couple of weeks should be enough.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Yunus, for joining us on the program this morning.
Well, it's been an incredibly difficult last couple of years as a result of the global pandemic. And just when it seemed that the global economy was progressively coming out of the pandemic situation comes news of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and all that entails. Well, joining us now to discuss some of the key global concerns in terms of the economy, what it means for billions around the world, the MD of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva. Thank you, ma'am, very much for being with us. Now, the IMF cut its global forecast down to 3.6%. The war in the Ukraine hasn't come down. In fact, it could stretch on. Is it your concern that the global growth forecast could come down even further?
What we are seeing since we downgraded growth is that downside risks are materializing. Financial conditions are tightening, the dollar is appreciating, and the Chinese economy is slowing down. As you said, the war continues to be a major setback factor for the global economy. So further downgrades are not out of question. What I want to stress are 2 points. One, different countries find themselves in very different positions. Why? Because some have recovered more from the pandemic-induced crisis, others less.
Right.
Some are more dependent on imports from Russia, Ukraine, others less.
Right.
And some have higher level of debt, therefore more vulnerable to tightening of financial conditions, others have less.
Right.
So when we look at the year, which is going to be a difficult year, we would likely see some economies slipping into recession, but overall, no global recession. Let's remember...
Okay, so that's some good news.
Yes, 3.6%. This is the annual average of the previous decade.
Right.
And there is a long way to go from 3.6% to minus territory for the world.
Right. Ma'am, let's talk a little bit about food insecurity as a result of the crisis again in Ukraine. That's a major concern. It drives up inflation all across the world. There is fuel inflation as well. Again, that's something that's driving up cost. Now, this affects countries around the world, particularly the developed countries. Your thoughts on how critical the situation is?
The food situation is extremely serious. Even before the war, because of climatic events, we have seen harvests dropping in many places, and the risk of famine already looming in the Horn of Africa. With the withdrawal of supplies from Russia and Ukraine, both very important grain producers, the push on prices is just overwhelming. Even this last week, when slowdown in China in particular led to decline in oil prices, food prices continue to climb up. We are very concerned that this has led to export restrictions in nearly 30 countries, and we would like to see the world coming together to prevent a food crisis that can virtually kill millions of people.
Ma'am, you're talking about export restrictions. Are you disappointed at the Indian export restriction on wheat?
I do have an appreciation for the fact that India needs to feed nearly 1.35 billion people. And I do have appreciation for the heat wave that has reduced agricultural productivity in India. But I would beg India to reconsider as soon as possible, because the more countries step into export restrictions, the more others will be tempted to do so. And we would end up as global community less equipped to deal with this crisis and crisis to come in the future.
If India were to restrict export restrictions now, to end export restrictions, how much would it ease the global food insecurity situation?
Well, India is a source of wheat export, and wheat is one of the areas where Ukraine and Russia have been dramatically impacted by the war. So depending on how much India can export and where it directs its export, it could have actually significant impact, especially if exports go to the countries most severely impacted, like Egypt or Lebanon, where what we see is not only risk of hunger, this is already happening, but risk of social unrest and impact on global stability as a result.
Ma'am, the global inequality of vaccines has been a major factor which affects not just human lives but also the global economy. Do you believe that that has been addressed to a large extent now?
Where we are today is that availability of vaccines is much less of an issue. What is a problem is the delivery of vaccines, in other words, from veil to shot in the arm, as well as vaccine hesitancy, misinformation, pushing people away from what is in their best interest. We also learned that vaccines on their own, they are not enough. What we need is testing, we need surveillance so we know what is happening where. We need the protocols, masking, distancing, and what we are advocating also is more attention to treatment, which has come up significantly. So a holistic approach to the whole set of COVID-19 protection measures is what we are advocating for.
One final question, ma'am. The situation in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is in debt. It's a real crisis at so many levels. What can be done to assist the Sri Lankan economy, and given the fact that they are in debt, they're unable to make their international payments, what is your prognosis?
I feel for the people in Sri Lanka. It is breaking my heart to watch the pictures of what is happening in a country that once was quite prosperous. It is a result of mismanagement, and therefore the most important thing to be done is to put the country back on a sound macroeconomic footing. And there has to be debt restructuring for Sri Lanka, which we will strongly support. We have a technical team in the country. We are ready to support Sri Lanka once we have clarity of what the program may look like and how that can be restructured. And I want to express my gratitude to India for being such a good friend of Sri Lanka and for advocating for support for Sri Lanka in this very difficult time.
Thank you. Well, wonderful talking to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for doing that. Very strong words there from the MD of the International Monetary Fund on the importance of countries no longer restricting the export of food at a time when there is a global crisis. India still has an important role to play. She reaches out also to people in Sri Lanka, the IMF acutely aware of the situation in that country.